Imagine this. You've created a whole bunch of standard operating procedures or SOPs and an SOP system. You put it out there, everyone's smiling, but then you come back a few weeks later or a few months later and realize that no one's really using your SOPs. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they hate you? Well, the good news is it's probably nothing personal. That is, unless your SOPs look like this, as opposed to something like this. If that's the case, you probably don't need to watch the rest of the video. Just pick up the phone and give us a call. We can help you with this. That's not a problem. Seriously, though, throughout our many years of experience, we've talked to a lot of people, and we've come up with, I came up with a list of the 8 most common reasons why people aren't using SOPs. So we'll get right to the point, and we can start with number 8, and that is sometimes, quite often, people are simply unaware that SOPs exist. And a lot of people think this is impossible. How could anyone be unaware? But yeah, in my experience, what happens is the people that need the SOPs the most are the ones that are most likely to be completely unaware that they exist. I remember several years back, I was working in a brewery on the midnight shift, and I saw a young man getting ready to spray cleaning foam into a live electrical cabinet. And I said to him, whoa, stop there just a moment before you do that. That might not be a really good idea. And as a matter of fact, did you know that there's an SOP written for how to clean this area? And I knew that because I had written the SOP. And he explained to me, he said, well, I'm just a temp worker. The person that normally cleans this area is called in sick, and they just told me to clean it. And I had no idea the SOP existed. And it's interesting. So these kind of things happen all the time. Is the people that really need the procedures simply are not aware they exist. So we need to have systems in place, whether it's training or communications, so that people know. Number seven is similar to number 8 in that sometimes it's simply hard to access SOPs, or people may be aware that they exist, but it's difficult for them to access them, or they may not even know how to access them. This is interesting to me. 30 years ago, before ISO 9000, it was really common to see procedures out at each workstation, sometimes in a binder or sometimes laminated and put on a hook. And then ISO came along and made everyone really conscious about things like document control and also this idea if we have procedures, then we need to actually be doing what's in those procedures. And a lot of managers got really scared and they took all the procedures away. I should mention that that was never the intent of ISO. This is just a poorly designed workaround that a lot of people had done. The good news today is that there are plenty of super cool high-tech ways for people to access their SOPs. We have electronic performance platforms such as the Acadia Performance Platform and others where you can access SOPs electronically. A lot of companies set up their own systems to allow people to access SOPs via computers or most commonly on a tablet. We have an electronic version that we can bring up on a tablet or sometimes even a phone. These are great if we have access to the SOP system. One other thing we can do is a lot of people are putting barcodes or QR codes out at the equipment or on the machinery, so the users can actually scan in the QR code, and it'll bring them directly to the procedures or the location where those procedures live. So a lot of really cool things, and they're actually easier to do than a lot of people think they are. So it's important that, what's the point of having procedures if people don't know how to access them? Number 6 says no SOP culture. What is an SOP culture? Well, it's an environment where people use SOPs, they use them all the time, and it doesn't occur to them not to use them. Now, we can go the opposite way. Sometimes, if we let people think that use of SOPs is optional, it's up to you whether you use them or not, then they're probably not going to use them. It's easier to establish an SOP culture if you have well-written SOPs where people perceive the value of those SOPs easily. One of the industries where we see the very strong SOP culture is the aviation industry. Whether you're in the cockpit crew or you're an aviation mechanic, you're using checklists and procedures all the time. And if you don't, you're probably not going to last long in that industry. Number 5, no trust. This is a biggie. Many times I've had operators say, yeah, I don't use the SOPs because they're not accurate. They contain inaccurate information or outdated information. And one of the things that we found is if our users find one thing in that procedure and they look at it and say, yeah, that's outdated, we don't have that thing anymore, or we don't do that anymore. As soon as they see one item that's inaccurate or outdated, they're basically losing confidence in the entire procedure. So it's very, very important that we keep our procedures updated, that we create them with accurate information, relying on subject matter experts and key performers, as well as doing the research to verify accuracy. It's also important that we have a system of feedback, and that is when people recognize outdated information or inaccurate information, that they can provide that feedback to the process owners or the keepers of the document so they can be updated on a regular basis. The good thing is we do have modern systems that allow us to do that feedback in a very efficient manner, but we have to make sure that it happens. Number 4 is an interesting one. I call it super proficiency. Sometimes people say to me, they say, Greg, our people don't need SOPs. They're so good at what they do. They do it over and over again. They've got a lot of experience. They're really good at it. The procedures, they just don't need them. And my first thought on that is, well, hey, that's great. That's great that you have such a highly skilled workforce. But then if you really start to think about it, I don't know. Let me ask this question. Has something like this ever happened to you? Have you ever walked out of the house without your keys, your wallet, your cell phone, your security badge? Yeah. So leaving the house is something we do every day. Certainly we do it hundreds of times every year. It's not a difficult task. It's routine, yet we can still make mistakes. One thing we know from experience is that the more repetitive a task becomes, the more likely that a human error will occur. How do we get around that? Well, fortunately, there are certain formats for SOPs we can write that appeal to both the experienced user and the inexperienced user. We can write them on different levels, or we can create what we call skimmable procedures, or we can use checklists. One of the things that I think about is, in the airline industry, who's more proficient or professional than airline pilots, yet they use checklists for almost everything they do. The other day I was watching one of those airline disaster shows, and the pilots had declared an emergency, and the air traffic controllers had given them immediate clearance to land on the runway. And I was a little surprised when the pilots radioed. They said, we need a few more minutes, or we're working on our landing checklist, and then we'll be ready to take that information. And my first thought was, you guys know how to land this plane. Just get the plane on the ground. You don't need a checklist. But then I started thinking about it more, and I'm like, no. Here's the moment where you need the checklist the most. In these stressful situations where things are going wrong, even though you know how to land the plane, having that checklist ensures that you're not going to forget something, and something's not going to go wrong. And it also puts you in the right frame of mind. So, another thing we can learn from the airline industry. Number three, sometimes we have procedures that are too simple or generic. We're writing SOPs and maybe they're just really, really written at a super high level that they don't add any value. What if I had a procedure that said, step 1, start up the nuclear reactor. Step 2, shut down the nuclear reactor. I might look at a procedure like that and think, yeah, it's lacking some detail to be really useful. Sometimes this happens when people feel that they had the need to write some kind of SOP, but they either didn't have enough information or they weren't really serious about it. Number 2, procedures that are not concise, or we could say they contain too much crap. One of the challenges in writing procedures is to provide the users with just the right amount of information that they need without overloading them with a bunch of things that are not relevant. Some procedure writers always feel that they need to document everything they possibly ever knew or learned about the process, where most users find this just confusing and frustrating to have to page through all these documents just to find the part that applies to them. I remember years ago, an engineer showed me a procedure that he was really proud of as a SOP, something he had written at a previous company. And it was a procedure to perform preventive maintenance, a check of emergency lights. And you know what those things are, right? The emergency lights. These are those battery-powered lights that you see in a lot of places that they light up when the power goes off. And we want to test them once a month. And the way you do that is you just press the button. There's a test button on it. You press the button, watch the lights come on, let go of the button, lights go off, and you're done. His procedure was 27 pages long. I am not making this up. I should talk about boilerplate here. Boilerplate is this idea of we're just repeating text. We just paste it in from the previous procedure, and we sometimes fill up cover pages and additional pages with the same text that's in document after document. And this is bad because people will quickly realize that it's boilerplate and they'll stop reading it. And it's going to do exactly the opposite of what you're doing. So yes, I highly encourage you to control the amount of boilerplate you put in these procedures if you want to make them usable. Which takes us to number 1, procedures that lack clarity. Or in other words, the user of the procedure is asking the question, what's the part that tells me what do I do here? Probably the most important thing that a well-written procedure will have is a lack of any ambiguity. In other words, the user knows exactly what it's telling them to do, and it's absolutely clear and it's unambiguous. This is the challenge. At APS, our most popular 2-column SOP format template really assists in clarity. Here's how it works. The left column contains the steps. Everything that's in that left column on the procedure is an action step that the users of the procedure are required to do. The right column contains key points, which could include notes or text or photos or graphics or figures, things that will assist in clarity, but there are no action steps in the right column. So over time, people are using this format. They know exactly where to look. They know that the left column will tell them what to do. The right column will provide clarity or additional information. Another element of clarity is writing the SOP to the correct level for the users, the people that are actually using the procedure. So here we are, 8 reasons why people don't use SOPs. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Did I forget anything? Feel free to leave a comment below. I should mention that I intend to do a whole series of videos to dive deeper into each of these categories and share some of the things we've learned over the years. In the meantime, feel free to visit us on the web or give us a call if you'd like more information about our SOP writing services. Thanks for your time, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.